The Weight of Freedom, a modern exploration of Sartre's existentialism. Picture this. You wake up tomorrow morning and every object around you has lost its purpose. Your coffee mug doesn't know it's meant to hold liquid. Your smartphone has forgotten it was designed to connect you with others. Your car sits in the driveway, puzzled about why it exists. Sounds absurd, doesn't it? Yet there's something eerily familiar about this scenario. Because while every tool, every device, every invention around us was created with a clear intention, a predetermined essence, there is one thing in your immediate vicinity that wasn't you. This realization haunted a young French philosopher named Jean-Paul Sartre, leading him to one of the most radical conclusions in human thought, that we are fundamentally different from everything else that exists. We are not products of design. We are not here for a reason. We simply are. And from this seemingly simple observation flows a philosophy that would reshape how we understand freedom, responsibility, and what it means to be authentically human. Walk through any modern city, and you're surrounded by purpose-built objects. The traffic light exists to regulate flow. The bench exists for rest. The skyscraper exists to maximize space. Each carries within it the intention of its creator, what philosophers call its essence preceding its existence. But when we turn this lens on ourselves, something breaks down. What were you designed for? What is your built-in purpose? Unlike the calculator on your desk or the car in your driveway, you can't point to a manual that explains your intended function. This isn't a modern dilemma. Humans have always grappled with purpose, often finding answers in religion, tradition, or cosmic order. But Sartre, writing in the shadow of 2 world wars in a century that had witnessed unprecedented human-made horrors, arrived at a different conclusion entirely. Jean-Paul Sartre didn't emerge from an ivory tower. His philosophy was forged in the crucible of early loss. His father died when he was barely a year old, and later rebellion against the bourgeois values embodied by his stepfather. Growing up in the early 20th century, Sartre witnessed a world where traditional certainties were crumbling. Unlike his existentialist predecessor Søren Kierkegaard, who found meaning in the leap toward God, Sartre took the opposite path. His was an existentialism built on absence, the absence of God, of predetermined meaning, of cosmic purpose. Partnered intellectually and romantically with Simone de Beauvoir, Sartre developed a philosophy that would challenge not just how we think about ourselves, but how we live. His central insight was deceptively simple, yet profoundly unsettling. Existence precedes essence. We exist first, and only then do we create what we are. To understand Sartre's radical claim, we need to dive into his view of consciousness itself. Drawing from Edmund Husserl's phenomenology, Sartre observed that consciousness is always consciousness of something. It's directed outward, toward objects, people, ideas, even imagined things. But here is where Sartre departed from his predecessors. He argued that consciousness itself is nothingness. Not nothingness in the sense of non-existence, but nothingness in the sense of having no fixed content, no predetermined structure. Consciousness is like a spotlight that illuminates everything except itself. This emptiness isn't a defect, it's our superpower. Because consciousness has no fixed essence, it's infinitely malleable. It can direct itself toward any object, adopt any perspective, imagine any possibility. This nothingness of consciousness is what allows us to transcend our circumstances and create ourselves anew. Think about it. Right now, you can imagine yourself as someone completely different. You can envision alternative futures, regret past choices, or conceive entirely fictional scenarios. This capacity to step outside the present moment, to be other than what you currently are, is uniquely human. Sartre distinguished between 2 fundamental ways of existing in the world. There's being in itself, the mode of rocks, trees, and yes, forks and trains. These things simply are what they are. A stone doesn't wake up one morning and decide to be something else. It exists in a state of complete self-identity, fixed and unchanging. Then there's being for itself, our mode of existence. We are constantly becoming, never simply being. We exist in a state of perpetual self-creation, always projecting ourselves toward future possibilities. We can reflect on our existence, question our choices, and fundamentally alter our trajectory. This doesn't mean we're completely unconstrained. Sartre acknowledged what he called facticity, the given conditions of our existence. You didn't choose your DNA, your birthplace, your family's economic status, or the historical moment into which you were born. These factors shape your starting point. But and this is crucial, they don't determine your destination. Your facticity sets the stage, but you write the play. If you've ever stood in a supermarket aisle, overwhelmed by 37 varieties of breakfast cereal, you've had a tiny taste of what Sartre saw as the human condition writ large. We don't just choose what to eat, we choose who to become, moment by moment, decision by decision. This freedom is intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. Without a cosmic instruction manual, how do we navigate the infinite possibilities before us? Sartre's answer was both liberating and sobering. We are entirely free to choose and entirely responsible for what we choose. Consider that bowl of cereal sitting in front of you right now. You could eat it normally, or you could walk outside and throw it at a stranger. Both options exist. The fact that you, presumably, choose the first over the second is not because you lack the freedom to choose. Otherwise, it is because you accept responsibility for the consequences of your actions. This is where Sartre's existentialism reveals its ethical core. In a godless universe, you become your own moral authority. You can't blame divine command, natural law, or social convention for your choices. Every action is yours to own. Sartre's famous declaration that hell is other people is often misunderstood. He wasn't suggesting that humans are inherently evil or that solitude is preferable to companionship. Rather, he was observing something more subtle and profound about how we experience ourselves in relation to others. When someone looks at you, they see you as an object, a fixed entity with certain characteristics. Their gaze transforms you from a free, self-creating subject into a thing to be categorized and judged. This look forces you to see yourself from the outside, to experience yourself as others might perceive you. But here's the deeper point. We don't just affect ourselves through our choices. Every decision we make sends ripples through the human community. When you act, you're not just creating yourself, you're creating a model of what it means to be human. You're saying, through your behavior, this is what people like me do in situations like this. The weight of this realization can be crushing. You're not just responsible for your own life, but for how your life influences the broader human project. Faced with such overwhelming freedom and responsibility, many people do what comes naturally. They run. Sartre called this escape mechanism bad faith, the act of deceiving ourselves about our own freedom. Bad faith takes many forms in modern life. The office worker who claims they have no choice but to stay in a soul-crushing job. The person who says they had to respond angrily because of their personality type. The citizen who insists they bear no responsibility for their society. Has problems because they just one person. All of these responses share a common thread. They deny the fundamental freedom that Sartre saw as inescapably human. They treat themselves as things with fixed natures rather than as conscious beings capable of self-transformation. Consider the middle manager who justifies questionable decisions by saying they were just following orders. Sartre would argue that this person is acting in bad faith. They had the freedom to choose differently, perhaps to refuse, to resign, or to find creative alternatives. The fact that these choices might have come with costs doesn't negate their existence. Sartre's insights feel particularly urgent in our current moment. We live in an age of unprecedented choice, from career paths to lifestyle options, from political affiliations to identity categories. Yet paradoxically, many people feel more constrained than ever. Social media algorithms tell us what to see. Marketing campaigns tell us what to want. Social pressures tell us what to value. It's easier than ever to live in bad faith, to let others make our essential choices while we convince ourselves we're simply responding to external forces. But Sartre's message remains uncompromising. You are not your job title, your social media profile, or your consumption patterns. You are not the sum of other people's expectations or your past mistakes. You are a conscious being capable of radical self-transformation at any moment. This isn't a comfortable truth. It would be easier if we came with user manuals, if our purposes were clearly defined, if our paths were laid out in advance. But according to Sartre, this discomfort is the price of being human. So what do we do with this freedom? How do we live authentically in a world without predetermined meaning? Sartre doesn't offer a simple answer, and that's precisely the point. The moment someone else tells you how to live, you've surrendered the very freedom that makes you human. Instead, he offers something more challenging: the recognition that you are always already choosing, whether you acknowledge it or not. Every morning when you wake up, you face the same fundamental question: what will you make of yourself today? Not what will happen to you, not what circumstances will force upon you, but what will you actively create through your choices? This isn't about grand gestures or life-altering decisions. It's about recognizing that even in the most constrained circumstances, some element of choice remains. Even if you can't control what happens to you, you can control how you respond to what happens to you. Sartre's existentialism isn't for everyone. It demands that we take full ownership of our lives in a way that can feel overwhelming. It refuses the comfort of external validation or predetermined purpose. It insists that we are exactly as free and exactly as responsible as we fear we might be. But for those willing to embrace it, Sartre's philosophy offers something remarkable: the recognition that you are not a fixed entity responding to external forces, but a creative process continuously bringing itself into existence. You are not a thing with a predetermined essence, but a consciousness capable of infinite self-transformation. In Sartre's words, man is nothing else but what he makes of himself. This isn't a burden to be endured, but a freedom to be celebrated. You are not condemned to be free. You are privileged to be free. The question isn't whether you'll choose regardless. The question is whether you'll choose authentically, with full recognition of your freedom and responsibility, or whether you'll choose in bad faith, pretending that your choices aren't really choices at all. Right now, in this moment, you are creating yourself. What will you make?